In front of cameras, reporters, and the American public, Jasmine Crockett exposed a truth Karoline Leavitt wasn't prepared to face, and the eruption was instant. It started like any other morning inside room 2123 of the Rayburn House office building. The Committee on Media Transparency had a full schedule, witnesses lined up, coffee cups in hand, aides whispering last-minute notes. The air was stuffy from too many people packed into one room, but the tension wasn't coming from the heat. Representative Jasmine Crockett, dressed in slate blue and already skimming her printouts, wasn't in the mood for theatrics. She knew this hearing wouldn't be easy. The stakes were too high. Accusations of media manipulation, corporate bias, deep pocket lobbying, and a public slowly losing faith in what they see and hear. She had done her prep. She always did. Across the aisle sat Karoline Leavitt. Younger, louder, and recently more visible thanks to a string of high-profile interviews, Leavitt had developed a reputation for sound bites more than substance. But today, she didn't come for sound bites. At least, not at first. "Let's be clear about the agenda here," Leavitt said with a polished smile as the meeting was called to order. "Americans deserve truth. What they don't deserve is the government trying to police what counts as real news." Jasmine didn't flinch. She'd heard that line 100 times before, maybe 1,000. The chairman gave the opening statement bland as ever. Then came the roll call. Then the introductions. All routine. Until it was Jasmine's turn to speak. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," she said, looking down briefly before lifting her eyes to the other side of the table. "I'd like to begin by asking Representative Leavitt something simple. Can you name one example, just one, where a media outlet has faced consequences for spreading disinformation tied to a campaign donor?" Karoline didn't hesitate. "I think it's a loaded question. What you're asking—" "It's a yes or no," Jasmine cut in, her tone calm but unshakable. "Just one example. I'm not looking for a speech." Laughter rippled quietly from the seats behind her. Jasmine didn't smile. Leavitt leaned in, eyes narrowing. "I think it's fair to say we're all aware that the media landscape is complex, but my concern is that this hearing isn't about fairness. It's about control. And I'm not here to play along with that." There it was, the shift. She had taken it personal, but Jasmine didn't bite. She kept her voice even. "So, no answer then?" Karoline didn't respond. She reached for her water bottle instead. To anyone watching on the live stream, staffers, journalists, and viewers from across the country, it looked like a typical political joust. But inside that room, there was something off. The way Karoline's hand trembled slightly as she set her bottle down. The way Jasmine was no longer glancing at her notes. She was watching, listening, and that's when something happened. Something subtle. Karoline broke eye contact. It wasn't much, just a flicker of discomfort. But for someone who made a name off of on-camera confidence, it said a lot. "Let me rephrase," Jasmine said. "Have you, in your time in office, ever called out a news outlet for misleading reporting when that outlet benefited someone politically aligned with you?" Silence. Then, "I think that's a mischaracterization of the issue at hand." Jasmine cut her off again, this time with just a slight shake of the head, not dismissive, just tired of the dance. And still, the hearing hadn't even hit the real moment. That would come later. But the quiet build was beginning, and no one in that room, even Karoline, could have predicted just how loud it would get. But the next exchange would break the surface, because Jasmine wasn't just asking questions. She was waiting for the exact moment to make one point impossible to ignore. Representative Crockett leaned slightly forward in her chair, elbows resting on the polished table, fingers loosely folded. She wasn't smiling, but her eyes were focused, locked onto Karoline Leavitt like she was trying to read something written behind her face. There was a stillness to Jasmine in that moment, like someone holding their breath underwater, just waiting for the right second to surface. Karoline noticed, and it was starting to mess with her rhythm. "I find it interesting," Jasmine said slowly, "that we're holding a hearing on transparency, yet when asked direct questions, some of us choose to answer like, this is a game of dodgeball." Karoline scoffed, more for the cameras than anything. "With all due respect, Congresswoman, I don't need a lecture on how to answer. I was invited here to contribute, not to be interrogated." "You were invited to speak truth," Jasmine replied, voice steady, almost too calm. "If that's uncomfortable, maybe the issue isn't the question." The pause after that was heavy. Everyone in the room felt it. Karoline leaned back slightly, smoothing the sleeve of her blazer. She hated losing ground, especially in front of an audience. That was her entire currency. Composure, snark, sound bites. So she changed tack. "I understand you're frustrated," she began, voice dripping with condescension. "But maybe your anger would be better directed at the actual tech giants feeding false narratives rather than your colleagues who happen to disagree with you politically." It was slick, framing Jasmine as emotional, turning the focus elsewhere, trying to knock her off balance. But Jasmine didn't blink. "My frustration," she said, "isn't personal. It's historical. We've seen what happens when people in power avoid accountability behind pretty language and empty gestures." And then came the line that tilted the room. Like when someone brands themselves as a family values candidate while their own marriage is cracking under the weight of public scrutiny. The silence hit fast and hard. Karoline's eyes darted toward the chairman, then back to Jasmine. "Excuse me?" Jasmine sat still. "No names mentioned, just patterns worth paying attention to." Karoline straightened in her chair, clearly rattled. "That's a low blow, and frankly, it's beneath the integrity of this committee." "It's only low if it hits something true," Jasmine replied, her voice soft now, controlled. The room was dead quiet, just the low hum of a recorder running and the barely audible scratch of someone's pen. Karoline's face flushed just a shade, barely noticeable unless you were looking closely. But everyone was looking closely now. "I'm not here to talk about my personal life," she said through clenched teeth. "You're not here to talk at all," Jasmine said calmly. "You're here to answer." It was a knife in the form of a whisper, not a shout, not even a raised voice, but sharp enough to leave a mark. The chairman cleared his throat awkwardly, trying to keep the conversation on track. "Let's, keep the discussion focused on the matter of disinformation and media bias, shall we?" Karoline nodded, lips tight. Jasmine said nothing. But in that moment, the energy had shifted. Not because Jasmine had insulted her. She hadn't. She hadn't even revealed anything specific. She'd simply held up a mirror, and Karoline had flinched. It wasn't about the marriage. It wasn't even about politics anymore. It was about control. Who had it, and who was pretending they did. But what came next didn't just rattle Karoline. It revealed something far deeper about how much she was really trying to hide. Karoline's jaw clenched as she reached for her folder, flipping pages she clearly wasn't reading. She was buying time. Everyone knew it. Jasmine, on the other hand, stayed still. Not smug, not theatrical, just quiet. And somehow that silence felt louder than anything said in the last 10 minutes. Even a few of the aides seated behind the panel began whispering. Not loud enough to get scolded, but just enough to show the mood had officially shifted. It was no longer about who had better talking points. It was about who looked like they were holding something back. The chairman tried to reframe the hearing, turning to another member to introduce a new witness, but the spark had already been lit, and Jasmine wasn't done yet. Once the witness finished their brief remarks, Jasmine leaned toward her mic again. "I have one quick follow-up for the Congresswoman from New Hampshire," she said casually. Karoline hesitated. "Go ahead." "I'd just like to clarify something," Jasmine said, her voice calm again, as if they were talking about nothing more than a bill amendment. "Earlier, you mentioned you're here for transparency, correct?" "Yes." "And that Americans deserve honesty from their elected officials?" "Of course." "Would you say that should extend beyond legislation?" Karoline paused. "I'm not sure what you are implying." "No implication," Jasmine replied. "Just a question about consistency. Because I think we both know when the public sees someone stand on a stage and preach integrity while quietly dealing with very public contradictions in their own life, it's hard to trust anything they say after that." Karoline opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Jasmine continued, cool and direct. "Now, I'm not the type to throw stones at people's personal lives, but when those lives are weaponized for image, when people campaign on family values and unity while screaming at their partner in the parking lot of a diner in Concord, that's not personal anymore. That's public character." The room froze. A reporter seated in the gallery dropped his pen. Everyone in New Hampshire had heard about that incident. Quiet whispers, one blurry cell phone video. No arrests, but a heated argument, Karoline yelling at her husband as staffers tried to pull her away from the car. It hadn't made national news, just a few local blogs, quickly buried under campaign spin. But Jasmine had just unearthed it on the congressional record, and she never said Karoline's name, never said husband, never even raised her voice. It was masterful. Karoline snapped. You have no right to bring that up. Jasmine raised a hand. I didn't bring up anything by name, but if you're reacting this strongly, maybe that says more than I ever could. Karoline turned to the chairman. Are we seriously going to allow this? The chairman, clearly uncomfortable, fumbled with his papers. Let's just, keep the questioning within bounds, Congresswoman. I did, Jasmine said softly. Someone behind Karoline shifted uncomfortably in their chair. Even her allies looked unsure now. There was a new energy in the room, like everyone had suddenly realized who was holding the match. Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't smirk or bask in the moment. She simply looked at Karoline, eyes steady. You want to talk about media bias? She said. How about the bias that protects certain people from the consequences of their own decisions, just because they smile on camera? Karoline opened her mouth again, but Jasmine waved her hand. That's all I have for now. It was surgical, not a cut, a precision strike, and Karoline knew it. But now, backed into a corner and fully exposed, Karoline would do what people always do when they feel power slipping through their fingers. She'd erupt. Karoline sat frozen for a full second, maybe two. Her eyes darted across the room, at her staff, at the reporters, then back to Jasmine, who still hadn't looked away. It wasn't just tension anymore. It was pressure, and it was cracking the surface. Let me just be perfectly clear, Karoline finally said, leaning toward her mic, voice tight. What we just witnessed was a smear job dressed up as a policy question. No one responded, so she kept going. I'm not here to be ambushed by cheap shots about my personal life, she snapped. What happens in my marriage has nothing to do with legislation. Jasmine tilted her head slightly. It does when the marriage becomes a campaign slogan. That hit. Everyone in the room knew Karoline had spent months touting her faith, family, and values platform. Her husband's photo was on every mailer. Their church appearances had been carefully staged. The image she sold was part of her brand. And now, just like that, the picture had a crack in it. Karoline's voice rose. You're out of line. Jasmine stayed seated, hands folded still. You're the one who's yelling. That made it worse. Karoline stood halfway, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You're using this hearing to settle a score. I didn't mention your name, Jasmine said again, soft but firm. But everyone knows what you meant, Karoline shouted, her face red now. You've clearly been digging into my private life for political gain. Or, Jasmine said, finally leaning forward, I read the same local article half your district already saw, and didn't forget it the second your press team told them to. Another pause. You could feel the room bracing. Someone on Karoline's staff whispered something behind her. She waved them off. I'm not going to sit here and be attacked, she said, voice quivering, not with sadness, but rage. You don't know anything about me. I know what the public saw, Jasmine said, calm as ever. And I know when someone can't answer a direct question, they usually pivot to playing the victim. Karoline scoffed, but her breath hitched. You're despicable. I'm direct, Jasmine replied. There's a difference. The chairman looked around nervously. Let's return to the matter at hand. But Karoline wouldn't let it go. This is character assassination, plain and simple. The moment was loud, not just in sound, but in weight. Karoline was unraveling in front of the cameras, on C-SPAN, on live streams across the country. Her anger wasn't strategic, it wasn't rhetorical, it was real and messy. That was the problem. She had walked in with control, but now her voice was cracking, her hands were shaking, and Jasmine hadn't moved an inch. Across the table, Jasmine glanced briefly at the camera crew in the back of the room. She knew they had everything, every word, every flinch, and she hadn't needed to shout once. Karoline pointed a finger now. You think this makes you look strong? It makes you look cruel. No, Jasmine said. It makes me look like someone who doesn't flinch when the truth gets uncomfortable. And that was it. Karoline sat down hard, pushing her chair back under the table with too much force. Aides rushed forward, whispering in her ear. She waved them away again. Jasmine leaned back, not victorious, not smug, just done. Everyone else sat in silence, absorbing what they had just seen. In the back row, a reporter from a regional news outlet scribbled something fast in their notebook. They knew this would go viral before lunch, but outside those four walls, something else was already happening. The moment was being clipped, shared, and dissected in real time, and the country was already picking sides. By the time Jasmine returned to her office on the third floor of the Longworth building, her aide Simone was already standing by the TV, remote in hand, a look of disbelief on her face. "They're playing it again," Simone said without turning around. Jasmine dropped her bag on the leather chair near the window, loosened her blazer, and stepped closer. CNN, then MSNBC, then a split screen with Karoline's face frozen mid-shout and Jasmine's calmly raised eyebrow next to it. The loop was non-stop. "It's been 10 minutes, Jasmine said. "Exactly," Simone replied. 10 minutes. You broke the internet." Twitter was on fire. The clip of Karoline erupting, shouting across the table, eyes wide, voice cracking, had already crossed 500,000 views on one account alone. And Jasmine, calm, measured, unshaken. People were calling it a masterclass. Others just called it karma. A text buzzed on Simone's phone. "It's Roland from local Dallas radio. Wants to get your statement on the hearing. You want to talk to him?" "Not yet," Jasmine said. "Let it breathe." She looked back at the TV, watching her own face on a 30-second loop. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like something overdue. Down the hall, in Karoline's office, the mood was entirely different. Aide after aide scrambled around a closed door while a press secretary held her phone tightly to her chest. "She's not taking any calls right now," she told a local reporter waiting by the elevators. Inside, Karoline sat behind her desk, arms crossed, screen frozen on a trending hashtag. Hashtag Crockett handled it. Another tag read, #Karoline meltdown. One video had stitched Karoline's outburst with a meme of popcorn being poured into a bowl. Another compared her speech to a toddler at a birthday party who didn't like the cake. It was brutal. On Reddit, users picked apart every second of the exchange like it was a televised boxing match. "Jasmine didn't throw a punch," one person commented, "but Karoline knocked herself out." Another wrote, "She cracked the second someone stopped letting her talk without challenge." Late-night writers were already working the incident into their monologues. One producer tweeted, "We're bumping a guest for this. Too good." Back in Jasmine's office, Simone scrolled through notifications. "People are asking where you got the story about the parking lot. You want me to draft a response?" Jasmine shook her head. "Nope. Don't engage. Let them talk." "It's all over TikTok, too. They're remixing it like a soundtrack," Simone said, half laughing. Jasmine sighed and leaned against the windowsill. "That's not what this was about." "I know," Simone said, "but it worked. And it had. Not because it was viral, not because Karoline lost control, but because people saw something real for once. They saw a woman stand her ground without shouting. They saw someone call out the gap between image and truth. And more importantly, they saw what happens when you try to weaponize your persona and forget to protect your reality. Across the country, people were watching this moment differently. Teachers were sharing it with their civics classes. Barbershops in Detroit, diners in Oklahoma, libraries in Santa Fe. Everyone had an opinion. And the fascinating part? It wasn't split cleanly down political lines. It was about behavior, about character. People were tired of the act. Even some conservative commentators admitted Karoline had overreached. "She came in ready to dominate," one of them said. But she didn't expect someone to see through the performance. The conversation shifted fast, from media bias to how public figures build facades and punish anyone who questions them. Jasmine hadn't attacked a person. She had exposed a pattern, and that's what stuck. But after all the noise, all the takes, all the trending hashtags, there was still one thing left to say. And Jasmine had saved that for someone who would really get it. The Capitol was nearly empty by the time Jasmine left her office. The halls echoed with the click of her low heels and the occasional hum of cleaning crews wiping down brass railings. She had ignored 6 calls and skimmed through 3 dozen emails. Everyone wanted a quote. Everyone wanted her reaction. But Jasmine wasn't in a rush to speak. Not yet. Downstairs, the cafeteria was dark except for the flicker of a vending machine. She wasn't hungry, just tired. The kind of tired that comes after you say something you've been holding in for too long. She pulled out her phone and scrolled. Not through mentions or hashtags, but through her messages. One stood out. Saw it. You good? Valerie Pierce. Jasmine smiled. Valerie had been her mentor since law school, former judge, current no-nonsense aunt figure, not big on politics anymore, but sharp enough to see through it. Jasmine tapped back. Come by, if you're still up. 30 minutes later, Valerie arrived with a box of takeout and a look that said, I already know everything. They sat in Jasmine's office under the dull hum of the overhead light. No cameras, no microphones, just two women, one of them finally able to breathe. You didn't flinch, Valerie said, handing her a container of fried rice. I didn't need to. Valerie sat down slowly, watching her. You know that wasn't just about her marriage, right? Jasmine nodded. It was about how easily people sell a version of themselves and punish anyone who doesn't buy it. That's exactly what it was. They ate in silence for a minute. Then Valerie said, You ever worry that saying it out loud like that makes you the villain in someone else's story? Jasmine took a sip of water. Sure, but silence lets people keep playing hero in a costume they haven't earned. Valerie smiled. You've been thinking about this for a while. I have, Jasmine said, because I'm tired of watching people lie to voters with polished smiles and Bible verses. You can't run on family values while treating your own family like props. Valerie leaned forward. You know the fallout's coming. It already started. You prepared? Jasmine shrugged. I didn't plan to say it. But once she went personal, I wasn't about to let her walk away untouched. Valerie looked impressed. And you didn't even have to raise your voice. That's the part she couldn't handle, Jasmine said. That I didn't yell. That I stayed calm. Because if I'd matched her tone, they'd be calling me aggressive by now. Valerie nodded slowly. You played it clean. I played it real, Jasmine replied. There's a difference. She leaned back in her chair, finally allowing herself to feel the weight of the day. Not victory, not pride, just relief. And somewhere in that moment, the room got quiet again. Not the kind of silence that feels empty, the kind that lets you hear yourself think. Outside, DC lights blinked in rhythm with the city always halfway between scandal and ceremony. But for a few minutes, in a forgotten office on the third floor, two women sat in peace. No cameras, no scripts, just truth. I don't want to be known for moments like this, Jasmine said after a while. You won't be, Valerie told her. You'll be known for not being afraid to speak when it counted. Jasmine looked out the window, eyes soft. I just wanted her to stop pretending. She's not the only one who heard you. Jasmine turned back. Good. But before the world moved on to the next headline, the next controversy, the next clip gone viral, there was still one message Jasmine wanted to leave with anyone watching, and she didn't need a microphone to say it. The next morning, the frenzy hadn't slowed. Cable news, podcasts, political blogs, everyone was running their version of what happened. Some said Jasmine Crockett had shattered the facade. Others claimed she was out of line. But no matter the spin, one truth was clear. Something had changed. Still, Jasmine kept her head down. No media tour, no press conference. Just one post, 7 words typed quietly from her kitchen table. Integrity matters more when no one's watching. No hashtags, no follow-up. She set the phone down and didn't touch it for an hour. That afternoon, she stopped by a community center in Temple Hills, Maryland. It wasn't on her official schedule. No press, just a group of high school students working on mock debates for a civics competition. She walked in unnoticed at first, jeans, sneakers, hair pulled back, but someone recognized her. That's her, a student whispered. One of the teachers waved her over with a big grin. Congresswoman Crockett, you've caused quite a stir. Jasmine smiled. I hear that. A girl in the front row, maybe 16, raised her hand. Did you mean to embarrass her like that? Or were you just tired of pretending like they don't get away with stuff? It wasn't hostile. It was honest. Jasmine didn't dodge it. I meant to tell the truth, she said, because I think people are done clapping for polished lies. The room got quiet. You'll hear a lot of noise from people trying to make moments like that about drama, she continued. But it was never about her marriage. It was about the way some folks use their image like a shield. While they do things behind closed doors they'd tear someone else apart for. A boy raised his hand. How do you know when to say something, like when it's worth it? Jasmine looked at him for a second. When you can't sleep at night without saying it. The teacher gave her a soft nod. You don't get many chances in public service, Jasmine said. Most of the time, you're just holding the line. But every so often, someone gives you the mic, even for a second. And you have to decide, do you keep playing nice, or do you say the thing that needs to be said, even if it costs you something? A pause. Then she added, I'd rather lose politely than win by lying. The students clapped, not loud, not theatrical, just honest. Afterward, a few of them came up to thank her. One girl asked for a photo. Jasmine took it, then left through the side entrance where her car was waiting. Simone was in the driver's seat. They loved you in there. It wasn't about that, Jasmine said. I know, Simone said, but it mattered. Jasmine stared out the window as they pulled onto the main road. In another part of town, Karoline Leavitt was doing her own damage control, closed meetings, private calls, a fresh PR plan. Her team was trying to reframe the moment as a personal attack, but the footage didn't lie. The more they tried to explain it, the worse it looked, because the truth had already landed, and it didn't need a press release to stick. That moment in the hearing wasn't about politics. It was about truth delivered without rage, exposure without spectacle. Jasmine hadn't humiliated anyone. She had simply stopped pretending, and people felt that. They saw a woman stand her ground without raising her voice and tell the kind of truth most folks are too scared to say aloud. She didn't win an argument. She reminded people what integrity looks like when it costs something. If you're watching this and thinking about your own moment, at work, at home, in your community, where something's wrong and everyone knows it, but no one says it, maybe now's the time. Say it, calmly, clearly, without fear. Because the truth doesn't always need volume. It just needs someone brave enough to carry it. If that matters to you, subscribe. We'll keep telling stories that don't flinch.